I know you've written about Claudine Gay in the past, the Harvard president, of course, now under fire for her testimony last week. Let's start with how you view her in general, because she's been on your radar prior to her congressional testimony.
She was always the wrong person at the wrong time for the wrong job. When she became president of Harvard, she had been the dean of Harvard College and had been a disaster. She was kind of instrumental in what's called the safeism policy. That is, keep students safe from dangerous ideas, but don't protect them from violence. She has applied a double standard. She's presided over an administration which canceled lectures by people who believe there are two genders, canceled lectures, rescinded invitations and acceptances to students based on what they might have said in high school to a friend. Harvard became the worst school in the United States for free speech. And suddenly, on December 7th, Claudine Gay discovered free speech in order to defend Hamas supporters who want to commit genocide against Israel. Her recent championing of the First Amendment is very questionable. She should have admitted to the Congressional Committee that under Harvard's standards, which are wrong, but under Harvard's long-term standards where microaggressions aren't permitted, of course calling for the genocide of Jews is against Harvard's rules. But she was not honest with the committee. She said instead, and I'll quote her, "We embrace a commitment to free expression." I wish it was true, but it wasn't true. She stands for the opposite of free expression. She stands for cancel culture, censorship, the diversity, equity, and inclusion monstrosity, bureaucracy, which has taken over college campuses. And so the board that appointed her initially repeated their mistake by keeping her on after she's proved her incompetence to lead Harvard.
I want to get to what she said before Congress, but let's first unpack a little bit what you said with regard to her, the atmosphere that she allegedly created. Was there specific incidents that come to mind that illustrate that for you in terms of?
One perfect incident. A man named Ron Sullivan was the first African-American dean, along with his wife, of Winthrop House, one of the great houses of Harvard. And he, under the Constitution, was asked to defend Harvey Weinstein, which he did for 1 month. She led the campaign to fire him because he made students feel unsafe. She said, if you're a dean, you have a pastoral responsibility to keep students safe. And she said he didn't adequately explain why he defended Harvey Weinstein, as if a lawyer has to explain why he exercises a constitutional obligation under the Sixth Amendment. So she was responsible for creating this atmosphere. Under her presidency, lectures have been canceled, admissions have been canceled, an atmosphere of intolerance has pervaded the campus. Not only that, but Harvard itself has a terrible policy. Just about a decade earlier, the great president of Harvard, Lawrence Summers, was fired by the Harvard Corporation because he said something that suggested to some that men and women may have unequal capacities in math, physics, and other subjects. That was not protected speech. But calling for the genocide of Jews is protected speech? That's the problem.
Go ahead. I've found one of the things about the testimony is, had I been answering that question, I think it's to immediately associate the term intifada with Jewish genocide seems, it's one interpretation, but when I've spoken to some people in marches, they consider it uprising, rebellion. Do you think it's fair to just...
The question was, what would Harvard do if somebody called for the genocide of Jews? She could easily have said, intifada doesn't mean genocide. And then the question would have been, but what if somebody calls for genocide? And she gave the same answer. Here's what her answer should have been. Under the policies that Harvard has had for many, many years, including the firing of Larry Summers, including rescinding of admission statements, under those standards, of course, calling for the genocide against the Jews violates Harvard's rules. Period, stop, end of the paragraph, end of the book. There'd have been no problem. But she couldn't get herself to admit that Harvard's policy on free speech is terrible. Instead, she said, under oath, quote, "We embrace a commitment to free expression." That isn't true. She never embraced a commitment to free expression until October 7th. She discovered the First Amendment when 33 Harvard student groups said that the rapes of these women and the murders of these women were all the fault of Israel, all the fault of Israel. And remember, this all happened before Israel sent a single soldier into Gaza. This happened as a result of the rapes and the murders, and she did a terrible job in responding to that. Her testimony was only the straw that broke the camel's back, but not the back of the corporation that originally appointed her, didn't want to admit their mistake, and compounded the mistake by keeping her on.
So was this sufficient grounds, you think, for her to be ousted? Just to make it clear sort of what the end game is here for this results of the testimony. Obviously, we've already seen the UPenn president has resigned, forced to resign, might be the right way to put it. What should happen to Claudine Gay at this point?
Well, I think she should resign by her own standards. She forced the resignation or the firing of Ron Sullivan because he didn't make students feel safe, which was a fake. He did make students feel safe. But in this case, there's no question she made students, Jewish students, feel unsafe. So by her own standards, she ought to resign, but also the board ought to resign. Remember that when the president of Penn resigned, so did the chairman of the board, Mr. Bach.
Yeah.
I think the chairman of the board here, Ms. Pritzker, should resign as well, because she was instrumental in picking Claudine Gay. And Claudine Gay was not picked because she's a great scholar. Indeed, her scholarship has now been questioned and challenged. She was picked because of DEI. She was picked as part of the woke progressive DEI program. And many colleges have done the same thing. And I think there are a lot of college presidents today who do not have the experience, the background, the courage to stand up to intimidation on college campus. So I think anti-Semitism is going to spread as long as there's a DEI bureaucracy, because that's what breeds anti-Semitism. So she's only a symptom of the problem. The problem goes deeper than her.
What do you make of the support that she's had? There's been certainly a wave of support in favor of her staying on within Harvard.
Members knew she would win, and I think a lot of them were just pandering to her. She's their boss, number one. Number two, they were right to say that the corporation shouldn't make its decision based on a pressure from donors, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't have made the decision to fire her. The letter never called for an investigation of what she's done and said. It didn't ask to have input from other people. Why didn't they speak to Steven Pinker? Why didn't they speak to me? Why didn't they speak to others who are very closely affiliated with Harvard who don't contribute money? They used the fact that Bill Ackerman contributes money to ignore his very substantial merit arguments against her. And so I think the letter was a disservice to academia. It gave no reasons. It simply said, don't comply or capitulate to pressure. That's right, don't capitulate to pressure, but decide on the merits. Now let's have a discussion of the merits. They didn't have a discussion of the merits. Instead, they had midnight meetings, and they, in their elitist fashion, and the Harvard Corporation is one of the most elitist institutions in the world, they reiterated their decision. And I can tell you, a lot of my friends on the faculty are opposed to her and opposed to the Harvard Corporation, but they're afraid to say anything because they know that the corporation and the president can control their lives. I have no such fear, and I don't blame others for capitulating to the fear. But Harvard today is a place of fear, intimidation, and a place where students who are Jewish, particularly those who wear a kippah or a Star of David, or wear, as I do, a flag of Israel and a flag of the United States, would feel very uncomfortable walking through the campus today. If I was walking through the campus today wearing what I wear on my lapel every single day, I think I would be I wouldn't be intimidated, but I would be harassed.
So